Regular vaccines have been around for 50 years. Smallpox, let's say, for 50 years. Yet the last case of smallpox was diagnosed in Africa this year. So even though we've had an effective vaccine against smallpox, it still existed as a disease across the world until this year. If we look at the rates of immunizations in this country for measles and mumps, rubella, and the like, there are 14 different immunizations. African Americans are immunized far less. And when we have breakouts, as we often do, with measles and mumps, pertussis, and the like, we're usually right in the middle of those breakouts because we have such lower rates of vaccination. Now, the reason we can get away with that is because everybody else around us is vaccinated. And so if everybody else is around us is vaccinated, then we're in a much better shape. If we don't get vaccinated, we're not likely to encounter the disease. And so that's what they call herd immunity. But you almost have to have 80% vaccination to get herd immunity. So now let's look at where we are now with the coronavirus epidemic. It's always been important to get the flu shot. If you look at the number of people who die from the flu, certainly it's well into the 50, 60,000. And it's disproportionately Black because we're less likely to get the flu shot. And so consequently, that's always been a struggle for us. And for me as a pediatrician, me as an allergist, I've really been, and me as a communicator, I have been really working with the community to get the trust to be vetted so that when I say something about it, people at least think about it. But I mean, I have a very small reach, but we have a lot of health resources talking about that across the country. All right, so let's just talk about the flu. All right, so clearly we're dying. Those people that do die of the flu are disproportionately Black. All right, now we have the coronavirus epidemic, whose symptoms as they present are very similar to the flu. So if you come to me and say, I got this, that, and the other, I don't know whether you've got flu or whether you've got the coronavirus. And being able to make that distinction is critical for your morbidity, I mean, how sick you are, and your mortality, whether you live or not. And so consequently, getting the flu shot at least eliminates from the mix the possibility that this is flu and these symptoms are real. So let's talk about the coronavirus and why we're doing this. I believe that African Americans have the right to make a decision about a vaccine any way they want. I just hope that they have the most meaningful information. The difference between this particular pandemic is that if you do not get a vaccine for the coronavirus, you are not likely to encounter it as much because other people will be vaccinated. But you're just at risk, same risk for morbidity and mortality as you would be if you didn't get the vaccine, as you are right now. I mean, so you can't go to the jazz concert, the Stone Soul picnic. You can't go to the basketball game, the football game, or any place where people gather, because there are going to be some people there, just like you, who are not vaccinated, who then have coronavirus, and you're likely to get it in one of those venues. And the only thing that's changed is that it may have taken you longer to get it, but once you get it, most people don't have a big problem with it, but many people are ventilator bound, and many people, 3,000 a day now dying, over 100,000 in intensive care units, over 14 million people infected. And so consequently, this is different. This is just different. You've been able to go around with any kind of theory you want, and you're entitled to that. I'm a person who believes that you should make your own decisions about your own health, and I don't be hypocritical here. But you've gotten away with not getting measles, mumps, rubella, and the traditional vaccine because everybody else is vaccinated. But that's not true with the coronavirus.
Dr. Lenoir, that's interesting. So folks, we just heard the definition of herd immunity, the real definition from a clinician, not the definition that Donald Trump uses, which is not, what he says is not clinical. He don't know, he is clinical, but his definition is not clinical at all.
No, he wants to kill off the weak. You kill off the weak and the strong survive.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
That's his philosophy. That's really not herd immunity concept.
Right. So that's interesting. So when others have, you made some good points. I just want to recap. When others have vaccinations, then in some ways, those of us who don't have those vaccinations are protected. But when it comes to the flu, because of the similarities between the flu and COVID, you're recommending that people get the flu shot, so that at least you can rule out the flu, and there's no mystery about whether you have the flu or COVID. And it sounds like too, you're making the case, which is courageous, because a lot of folk are pushing back. I mean, to be honest, I mean, there are even some white folk who are worried because they feel like this vaccine was created real quick. We don't know. There are some doctors. There's a doctor on television the other day, and he was saying the patients and anyone who would listen, take the vaccine, but wait a few months to make sure that others don't have side effects. I don't know. But it sounds like you're saying African Americans in particular should go ahead and take the COVID vaccine.
I'm saying it a little bit differently. I'm saying that what I'm trying to do is to add to your collective knowledge that you use in your decision making. My feeling is that I know these scientists, and we have several different credible African American organizations, Morehouse School of Medicine, National Medical Association, who are looking at the same research data and will make their recommendations based on that to the African American community. And so consequently, it's almost like a reverse of Tuskegee in many ways, though. Let's separate out the COVID vaccine from just vaccines in general. You've got people around the country giving information which is fundamentally false. That seems to be kind of the rule these days rather than the exception. And so what ends up happening is they go to our communities, they talk about vaccines being terrible, and so we don't get vaccinated. And then when these pandemics come, I mean, the ones that we're dealing with on a usual basis, like measles and mumps, polio and the like, we're less vaccinated. I'm saying that with this one, I don't think that that's a bad position to take. You shouldn't be the first one. Like, I'm gonna get me some dry ice. I'm gonna be right down at the airport when that vaccine comes in, because I recognize that good scientists have put this together and good scientists have looked at the data. And we'll hear some things coming out pretty soon. We've already seen this issue about allergy in a couple of patients in England where they started with the vaccine. But as an allergist, I can tell you, allergy is a very specific problem. If you have anaphylaxis to a drug or a peanut, you may not have anaphylaxis to anything else. But I think it's worth noting that the study eliminated those people who were highly allergic. So the recommendation will be, if you're highly allergic, be careful. I don't see any reason not to be the first person there. I'm just saying that eventually you're going to have to make a meaningful decision about the vaccine, get as much information as you can, get as much experience as you can, talk to and listen to vetted people in the African American community, and that's what we're trying to be. My approach with these PSAs is a little bit subtler. I have to try to slip something in often between Drake and Future, and that people will listen to and not turn the station. So that my feeling is what I'm doing has to be with the cadence of the people I'm trying to communicate with the vehicle I'm trying to use, and which is mostly traditional radio and TV right now. So that we pick the topics that I think impact African Americans the most. Certainly the issue of vaccines, but we picked asthma and we picked prostate cancer because I had prostate cancer this year. Before anybody starts, going to Costco getting me a casket, I had a small lesion. It was diagnosed early, was treated effectively, and I'm fine. But in that process of doing it, I waited a long time. Fortunately, it didn't cost me. But I want African American men to understand prostate cancer. And once you understand it, we also have a podcast at blackdoctors.speak, and I share my own experience of going to the doctor, getting the diagnosis, being presented with all this confusing information. And so I thought prostate cancer would be good to point out, and also asthma. And we don't intend to educate. We just want to plant the seed that maybe there's something you can do differently if you're sitting around with a particular problem, or if you're sitting there trying to make some sense out of this whole vaccine thing. Maybe what we do in those 29 seconds is to get you to think a little bit about it.
And make some more informed decisions.